Welcome members and friends and guests to the 19th Century Charitable Association in Oak Park, where it is our vision to be a dynamic cultural center for community learning. The mission also is to strengthen our community through learning, giving, and sharing our landmark building. And my name is Marie Cruz. I'm Program Chair of the Art Committee. This season, the program committee has scheduled 31 programs. Today's program is titled Driehaus Museum, Past and Present. Our presenter today is Lisa Key, Executive Director of the Driehaus Museum, a nationally recognized museum of art, architecture, and design located near Michigan Avenue. Lisa has spent her career working at several Chicago area museums, including the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Field Museum, the Art Institute of Chicago, and the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs. At Driehaus, she reopened the Murphy Auditorium, which is really fabulous, and expanded its many programs and outreach. Many membership events, more than there were in the past years, which is really super. And here's Lisa.
As Marie said, I am Lisa Key, and I am so honored to be here today, not only to kick off your year of programs, but also just to be a part of this incredible, thriving community. You know, I will admit, when Marie called me and invited me to come here, I had little understanding of the 19th Century Charitable Association. And in that time, I've really been able to learn a lot more about the organization, your goals, and I am incredibly impressed by what you all are contributing to your community through the scholarship programs, and also what you do as far as continued lifelong learning through programs like this. So I hope that I kick off the year well. You can tell me after I'm done. But I am excited to talk to you a little bit about the Driehaus Museum. You know, there are a lot of similarities between the 19th Century Charitable Organization, your beautiful facility, and our museum. And I also think one of the interesting things is we are two organizations rooted in the past, but that are really looking very much toward the future and are doing things that are very contemporary. So I really wanted to center my talk today on that, and to tell you a little bit about the people, the buildings, and the history of our museum, and to talk a little bit about our future. Sound good? Do I get some more thumbs up? Okay. This is me, and someone said that I do look like my picture, so I'm very happy about that. As we age, it's always good to make sure you have an appropriate headshot. So this is our museum, and I first want to talk about our historic campus of buildings. Oh, no, first I want to talk about our mission. Here you can see our mission, which is to engage and inspire the global community through exploration and ongoing conversations in art, architecture, and design. Those are the key subject areas that we really work in. And the other sort of thing and the time period that we are looking at is the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And that time period is really driven by our historic campus. Even more importantly, we are a museum of art, architecture, historic preservation. Just like the 19th Century Charitable Organization, we are dedicated to activating historic spaces. And I love seeing this building activated. I mean, it's been nice to be downstairs and to enjoy lunch together, and now to be in this beautiful, beautiful room. I think that historic preservation is exactly what we are doing today, experiencing spaces that are hundreds of years old in new ways. So well done for all of you as well. And the final area that we are very committed to is design. So talking first a little bit about our past and our history, we are the result of a 2003 through 2008 historic restoration that was led by our founder, Richard H. Driehaus. And I said a little bit at lunch today, the history of our museum is actually one that's rooted very much in the building. Our founder, Richard Driehaus, it was actually R.H. Love Galleries was renting the space that is now our museum. And he went there to look at a bust of Abraham Lincoln to purchase, and he was with a friend who said, forget the bust, you should buy this building and turn it into a museum. And if you knew anything about our founder, he was indeed a man of action, and he quickly did do that. And he led this restoration, which not only was an intensive interior restoration, but also the facade. And in this picture, you can kind of see, similar to the Newberry Library, that limestone, after years and years of, sadly, pollution, the facade was very dark and almost black in spaces. And one of the key points of this restoration was a new technology that was developed to clean that facade. So we're very proud of the restoration in our building. We opened in 2008 as a museum. So we're not, I like to say we're in our teenage years where we're experimenting with change and moving into adulthood. So architecture and historic preservation is at the core of what we do. And you will see we have what we call a campus of 2 buildings now from 2 different time periods that are connected together and comprise our museum. First, we have the Nickerson Mansion, which is the primary building which we've inhabited since 2008. This building was built in 1883, and it was built by the architects Burling and Whitehouse, known for their many significant architectural work in the city of Chicago. This building was later saved from destruction in 1919, which I'm going to talk about, and it was landmarked in 1976. Not only is this a City of Chicago landmark, but it is a National Historic Trust landmark as well. So, second building that we have only recently in the last 3 years acquired and reopened is the Murphy Auditorium. And we talked about it a little earlier. This was built in 1926. I think this building was built in 1928. So similar time period. The architects were Marshall and Fox. And it was inspired by a French cathedral, the Chapelle de Notre-Dame de Consolation, which was built in 1901. And it was acquired by the Driehaus in 2021. We were excited to landmark this building. It was not landmarked before we purchased it, and we went through that process and landmarked this building in 2024, which was just last year. To give you a little bit of the reference point architecturally, so on the left is the French cathedral that the Murphy was based on. I think copyright laws today might have kicked in a little bit, but in the 1900s maybe they weren't following as closely. It is indeed a very distinct replica of the original cathedral. And at the time, architects were really used inspiration and were inspired by this French work of architecture to build the Murphy Auditorium. I think it's 3% of the design has to be different in order for it to not come into a legal concern. I don't know if they hit that 3% on our facade. So no story about any museum could be told without talking about people. And for us, we have a lot of interesting stories about the people who have been involved with our museum and our buildings. So first, the Nickerson Mansion was built for the Nickerson family. And then they sold to the Fisher family, and then the American College of Surgeons came along, and then Mr. Driehaus and our museum. So since 1883, only 4 entities, families and organizations have been involved in our buildings, which is quite remarkable if you think about the real estate market and how many homes and buildings transition so frequently. So we are very proud of the people who've been stewards of our facility and our buildings. And there are some great stories. So the first family who built the house in 1883, it's the Nickerson family. On the left you see Matilda, and on the right Samuel Nickerson. We know that they lived here before they built the house. They actually had a home here on the property that burned in the Chicago fire. There are reports, news reports, that Mr. Nickerson, who was the head of First National Bank, now ultimately after many mergers is now the Chase Bank. He was the head of First National Bank working downtown. He took a horse and carriage from downtown, came up to the house, grabbed Matilda, one would assume, and they grabbed some artwork and some other, I would assume, clothing and items, and then left as the fire was taking place. They did not rebuild immediately, and in fact, we know that Chicago was very quickly rebuilding at the time. The Nickersons did not do that. Instead, they did, I guess, the modern-day equivalent of couch surfing, where they stayed at various friends' homes and clubs for a period of about 8 years until they started to rebuild the home. We know from census records, which you can see on the left, that they did build a home that had servants who were working there even prior to the fire and after, and they were, very much a part of Chicago society. The Nickersons, Mr. Nickerson was on the board of the Art Institute of Chicago. He was very active in arts and culture, and Mrs. Nickerson was one of the founding women of the Fortnightly. As I said, they came home and took some of their items from the fire and left, and they did not rebuild immediately. We don't know the story, and it's actually, there are so many interesting questions that we have that we can't yet answer about the history of our spaces. The Nickersons did not rebuild immediately, but when they did, boy, did they ever rebuild. They went big, and they went with, a very fashionable architect at the time. I'm certain that it was hard to get in line to work with these architects because there was such a demand for the building trades. That could have been one of the reasons for their delay. But the other thing that we know is they built a home that was completely fireproof. So its exterior is limestone, but the interior, and how many of you have been to the museum? Oh my gosh, I should have asked that earlier. So if you've been to the museum, you've seen that the interior walls, they're about this thick. They are interior walls, bless you. They are interior walls with a brick core and then surrounded by marble. So clearly there was some trauma about a fire and wanting to make sure that they could rebuild a completely fireproof home that also probably led to the delay. But we are very happy that in 1883 they moved into their new home, and this you can see is a picture from around that time. Right behind us is St. James, the cathedral, which did survive the fire and is still our neighbor to this day. And you can also see the interior. This is a historic photo of the interior spaces. As I said, the Nickersons were involved with the Art Institute of Chicago. They were art collectors themselves, and they had a beautiful gallery in their home where they hung artwork salon, what is known as salon style, from the top to the bottom. And they were collecting not only artists, impressionist artists from Europe, but they did have a significant number of regional church and other artists who were from the region. We know from records that they often hosted salons in their home. They hosted young emerging artists from the School of the Art Institute so that they could share their collection with them. In other photos of the time, we also see later they brought in two kind of like curio cabinets that they placed in this space. At the time when you were traveling abroad, you would often bring back jade or other types of ceramics, and so the family started to display that in this space as well. In 1900, the Nickerson family, they retired back to the East Coast. They were not originally from Chicago. They clearly decided to go back to where their family were, and they sold the home to the Fisher family. On the left, Catherine Eddy Fisher, and on the right, Lucius George Fisher. Mr. Fisher was a significant, again, another significant leader in the business and cultural community of Chicago, and together they lived in the home and started to make it their own. They did something a little different, made some different choices with the architecture and design. You can see in this photo, clearly Mr. Fisher, and at that time, if you think about where we were with regard to discovering the West, with regard to discovering our own country, Mr. Fisher was clearly doing that, hence the buffalo. And I think that's a water buffalo. Does anybody know on the right-hand side? But Mr. Fisher also wanted to make the home his own, and he enlisted the architect, the significant, also known for Oak Park, George Mayer, to do an addition to the home. So this is that gallery space that I showed you in another photo. I like to say that this was the original man den. Mr. Fisher really did it, and he worked with George Mayer on the addition of, and you can see a beautiful, and if you've been to the museum, a beautiful fireplace. Gotta get my bearings, can I see? Right here is a beautiful tile fireplace, very much in the Prairie School, and the addition of a stained glass dome, which was not original to the building. What you see in this photo is also a lamp, which was in the building in 2008 when we purchased it, but that lamp was centered in the center of the stained glass dome, and over the number of years was sagging and bringing that stained glass down. So we chose to not reinstall that lamp, and in the renovation we really chose to kind of split the difference and show this space as a library and not to show the space with the various animals that he had in it. Many people ask, and no, we do not have that taxidermy in our collection. The rumor, and I can only say this is a rumor, is that one of them is in a bar in Wisconsin. I don't know if that's true. And here's a better view of Mr. Mayer's stained glass, which is actually quite spectacular and is a highlight of our museum. And this was interesting. It comes kind of later in his career. I again, would love to understand how Mr. Fisher engaged Mr. Mayer, because at that point, he's in Kenilworth, he's doing homes. This was a pretty minor project in comparison, and we know from correspondence at the time that Mr. Fisher was maybe what you would call an overbearing client who had a lot of ideas and direction. So we'd love to do some more research and understand what their relationship really was. But you can see the stained glass and these beautiful, which we have them still, historic globes, which are just gorgeous. If you have been in the museum, to look up and see those globes, they are really quite spectacular. But the room itself was completely redone with the Fishers in 1919. What we also know is that after the Fishers had a daughter, a single daughter who lived in the home after their passing, and she no longer needed a home that required a staff to help her, and she put it on the market. We also know that it didn't sell, and at that time, this neighborhood, which the neighborhood at one point, the mayor of Chicago, the McCormicks, everyone was in that neighborhood, but they had started to move further north. So we know that this neighborhood was no longer the Tony neighborhood that everyone wanted to live in, and it got to the point where the house was on the market for a long time with no available buyers. What we have now come to understand is that we think this is the first example of a Chicago citizen-driven preservation effort. This list is the donor board of and I think it's about 112 donors who gave gifts to support the purchase of the Nickerson Mansion to keep it from the wrecking ball. That is significant because if you think about that neighborhood, there's the McCormick Mansion to our east, which is landmarked, and then there are the Cable Mansion, which is just to our west. But otherwise, there are no other significant homes from that era in our 6-block radius. So the group of 100 donors purchased it and then needed a place, someone to care for it. They needed an organization or an entity to take care of it. That's where the American College of Surgeons comes into play. The American College of Surgeons were created as an organization in the late 1800s, and their goal was really to put some parameters in place for surgical standards. A worthy mission, make no mistake, and they were really very much at the forefront of making sure that all surgeries happened in a safe and a standardized environment. The American College of Surgeons were given the Nickerson Mansion, and their pledge was that they would preserve the space and they would not change it in any way. And they were very true to their word. Here you can see what is our second, I think this is the second floor, one of the bedrooms that was turned into an office, so a 1960s executive office. I love this picture because also the two phones, which, and if any of you have your grandchildren or children, they probably don't even know what those things are on that desk. But they really used these spaces as offices, and they cared for them. They did not paint over the wood, which was so common at that time, and they made this their administrative offices. They also really did use it. I found these photos in our archive. I love the photo on the right, just a couple of people having their lunch break, drinking some Coca-Cola, and this. Yeah. But what I love is this is our oriel window, which is a significant space on the second floor, which has a great view of Michigan Avenue. So she was smart in the office that she did choose. The American College of Surgeons in about 1922 were given the opportunity from the widow of John B. Murphy to build a new building in his honor. Now, John B. Murphy, is anyone familiar with him or that name at all? So he was kind of like the Forrest Gump of surgical science in the city of Chicago. The Haymarket riots, he was there to repair people and help with the emergencies. Anytime there was a significant need for emergency care, John Murphy was there. He also created several important surgical procedures that are now credited, and his archive is actually held at Northwestern Hospital and Northwestern University. So his widow invited and gave a donation to the American College of Surgeons to build a building in his honor. And so that building was built on what was the side yard for the Nickerson Mansion. And you can see here, this is a photo, again, noting how already so this would have been 1926, the Nickerson Mansion is already seeing that darkened of the limestone. But you can see here, this is the facade of the Murphy Auditorium, which they nestled into the side yard. And then this is the McCormick Mansion. Someone was asking me at lunch, this was the location of the restaurant Biggs. It was right there. So the Murphy Auditorium was built. The surgeons they were a very hierarchical organization. They still exist today in Chicago. They had their annual meetings in that space. They never did surgical theater or had any surgeries in that space, but it was really a convening space or almost like a lodge for them. And they held on to that space until 2022 when the Driehaus Museum purchased it. So it is part of their history given that they built that building. So they have an archive that they've generously given to us about the creation of that building. So then in about 2003, our founder, Richard H. Driehaus, came for his visit to R.H. Love Galleries and decides to purchase the building. For those of you who are not familiar, Mr. Driehaus was an early pioneer of advanced investment strategies. He was someone who really thought differently and thought out of the box and was very successful in finance and investments. And he grew up on the south side of Chicago, was very much about historic preservation, design, architecture, and art. And this creation of this museum was kind of the fulfillment of all of those areas of his loves into one project, building and the renovation and restoration of this incredible building. We are very indebted to him for his careful eye and attention to detail that he personally oversaw with a team of architects and designers to really create an incredible experience. And many of you have been to the museum, so you've been able to experience it. I mean, really, I think there's nothing else in the city of Chicago that shows you the quality of design from that era. I mean, it's really as if today that family left for the night, they closed the doors, and you've just come in as they were living. And that's really our intention, is to show how the home was used and the artwork and designs that you would have seen. This is a side-by-side of our third floor ballroom, which you can see on the right, a historic photo of how the space was used originally, and then on the left, how we use it today for musical programs and events. One of the things a lot of people ask us, and it is an interesting thing, which we don't know, the lighting, most of the lighting, that's why I pointed out the lights in the Mayor Gallery, most of the lighting did not remain in the building. We don't know where it went, but most of the lights that we have now are historic and of that time period, but were collected later and added as part of the restoration. But I would love to find this beautiful chandelier here. I dug out because I think that it's really interesting to think about the restoration process. And, you know, many of you, and Marie was even saying, many of you have done home repairs or you're having some construction done in your home. And this is kind of like home repair on a different level. If you think about what was needed to take this building down to the studs, and in this photo you can see literally, here are the walls, which have been, all of the wallpaper has been removed, but what you see that they worked around is this incredible woodwork, which is everywhere in our museum. And then a little bit here, you can also see the tiles. And we are grateful, the American College of Surgeons, they did really keep all of that tile work. Original 1883 tiles from G.J. Lowe and Company were preserved and were on the walls, so there was a lot for us to work from. This is the dome. This is from above where the lighting comes down onto the dome, and you can see how the dome was meticulously restored. Most of that glass is actually from a small stained glass company in Elwood, Indiana, and we contacted them again and worked with them in the restoration. And then on the right, you can see some of the taxidermy before it went to that bar, I guess. But you can see how everything was really just taken down to the studs and then rebuilt. So I found a few photos where we can do a before and after, and so this is the sitting room on the first floor, and here it is today. If only these photos were in color. I mean, that's really, I think, would be. Also, most of the furniture was also sold prior to the American College of Surgeons. But what we have done, there's one set of furniture, and it's actually this furniture in the front parlor, is original to the home. And so that's part of a highlight of our visit. This is the front parlor, and here it is up close. And again, you can see we've really worked very hard to remain very true to the original as much as we could find documentation, but then to also add time and era-specific artwork that helps to complement the galleries. So I want to talk to you a little bit about where we are today and how the museum operates. We have a collection of art spanning of about a little under 1,000 works of art. It's comprised of paintings, also decorative arts. In the middle you see our Chickering piano, which is actually used and can play. We have used it for events and programs. And on the right we have a significant collection of Tiffany glass, Tiffany Studio, and this is one of the water lily lamps that is just so gorgeous and a part of our collection. But what makes us a really unique facility and museum is that literally the walls and everything is a part of our collection. And so when visitors come in, we have, I can never remember the number, I think it's about 21 different types of marble in that front main hall alone. Every wall covering, that's tile, wood, everything is a part of the collection and is cared for because it is a work of art. Today begins an annual closure. We're going to be closed for the next 3 weeks, and we do a very intensive deep clean in the month of January. All the carpets are pulled up, the floors are oiled. We take care of everything that is in every gallery space, and it's because absolutely everything that you see is a part of our collection. This space is also, this is the front smoking room, for those of you, and what I love about just looking at this space, and when you come to the museum, what I always suggest that visitors do is start by looking up. Look up from the ceiling and go down. So in this space you have this gorgeous tile in each of these wood recesses, also a pretty fabulous Tiffany & Co. Chandelier, and then you have this J.G. Lowe tile, again, different and distinct, going down to some beautiful lighting fixtures, and then one of our incredible fireplaces. So, and each room also has, it's a little hard to see with the lighting, but each room also has what was called at the time a wood carpet. Those of you who have historic homes, you may also know this. Every room had a different design. So it wasn't like, a pergo floor and every room had the same flooring. Every room had a different decorative design on the floor as a carpet would present. And one of the stories and the things that we're interested in doing more research on is to understand who were the artisans, where did they come from, how did they learn this craft to be able to do this incredible woodwork. So look up, but then also make sure when you visit that you look down and you look at the floor. So we are, as we've talked about, a museum of art, architecture, and design, and we have a very active exhibition program. We are dedicated to presenting 3 exhibitions a year, and those exhibitions really follow closely along with art, focusing on art, architecture, and design. We recently just closed, sorry for all of you Oak Parkers, if you didn't get a chance to see it, I apologize, but we closed a photography exhibition featuring the photography of Frank Lloyd Wright and also of those photographers that he exclusively used throughout his career. We think it was one of the few untapped areas of research about Frank Lloyd Wright. Those of you in this room are probably much more experts than we are. But we worked with and partnered with the Frank Lloyd Wright Trust here in Oak Park to present this exhibition because they hold an archive that has a significant amount of his photography and also those of the photographers he exclusively used. I love this photo of him on the right, which was one of the key images of our exhibition because it's very much a staged photo. What we know that he was very eccentric in his clothing, but this I feel like was like the photo that he would give to a client who wanted a very artistic home. So they would show an artistic architect. What's interesting and what sets us apart is our gallery spaces. So we are not what would be seen as in a contemporary space, a white cube gallery. In fact, we are the exact opposite of a white cube gallery. We have used the second floor, which was primarily bedrooms when it was originally built, or offices when the American College of Surgeons were there. But we used the second floor as our special exhibition spaces. So you can see in this photo, we work with the space and not against it. We install artwork through a cable hanging system, so we don't actually put any nails in the walls because that wall covering is, again, part of our collection. But what we find is when we're creating exhibitions and looking at them, we need to make sure that we are working with art that can kind of stand up in that space, and it can be a challenge. The other thing is our galleries are bedroom size, so they're not huge. So we find that projects that are more intimate, and this is a good example, do really well in our spaces. So this is an installation shot of the Frank Lloyd Wright exhibition. I was talking with someone earlier about our contemporary series, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about. And one of the things that we have found when we invite a living artist to come into the museum is they see their artwork in new and different ways. Because it's not against a white background, it's actually against a very active background that is actually supporting their artwork. So we've had really positive feedback. This is an example of 2 of the contemporary works that we've had. Since about 2017, we have an exhibition series called A Tale of Today. It's where we present contemporary artists who provide a link to the past. No art is really new. Artists are always mining the past and looking at the past to bring something new and interesting forward in their own artwork. And that's how we've been able to successfully partner with artists who are living today. In the middle is a bronze sculpture by the artist Sif Atona Westerberg, which was part of an exhibition we did last year. And on the right is a site-specific installation by the artist Nate Young. And so those are just 2 examples of the contemporary work that we present. What I would like to do, to encourage you all to come and visit again, is to talk to you next about the upcoming exhibition that we have, which is called Materialities. And for us as an institution who's trying to thread the past and the present together, one of the ways that we'd never really worked was to invite contemporary living artists to really examine the materials found within these historic spaces. So we are working with Dr. Giovanni Aloe, who is a faculty member at the School of the Art Institute, and who himself has really done a lot of research and art historical work in organic and the connections between nature and art. And together we have invited Chicago-based artists, and I'll show you, to think about the Nickerson Mansion to create new work. So we have asked them to explore the mansion. Our goal is to really help people rediscover our building and our home. To think about past histories. I was talking about the wood carpet. Well, one of our artists is really thinking about, okay, where did that wood come from? What type of wood is not available anymore? And how could they think about a piece of art today that incorporates some of that wood? To open up a conversation about historic and ecological dimensions of our space. And to also finally lead viewers on a journey of discovery that will bring our current historic buildings to life in new and unexpected ways. So this exhibition has the thesis of these goals behind it, and how we are getting to those goals is by working with artists who are in Chicagoland. The furthest artist we have is from Michigan, but we've really very much wanted to use and work with artists from Chicago because they're very much rooted in this city, and we wanted to make sure we were contributing back to the great artists who we have in our hometown. So this is a listing of the artists who are in our exhibition. And you will see, I know Becky was saying many of them have been gone through the School of the Art Institute, who have graduated from the School of the Art Institute, and some of them are very well known and others are very new. So I want to walk you quickly through some of the artworks just to pique your interest in this exhibition. So Rebecca Beachy is an artist whose work really thinks about material. She works a lot with leather, with carbon, and with organic materials. This is a desk that looks at the astrological symbolism of lunar phases. Again, for us, this is an artwork that looks at decorative arts and is bringing decorative arts into our spaces, but also these materials, these gorgeous materials that you see. Edra Soto, an artist who lives, I think lives in Oak Park, very close by, whose very much focus is on architecture and creating architectural artifacts by looking at space and how they relate to each other. That's the work that will be in the exhibition, and this is an example of an installation that she's done. What is also interesting in these images, think about this work not with these white cube gallery spaces behind them. They will be, again, in those gallery spaces with us. Jonas Becker, an artist and faculty member of the School of the Art Institute. This is a really interesting history that they've started to mine, and I'm using that word very specifically. There's a whole collecting, I guess, underground of coal figures from the beginning of the 20th century. These are two examples of them purchased from eBay, and they're actually made out of coal. The material is coal, and also the subject matter is coal. And what we know, and here's the link to our museum, is what we know is that Mr. Nickerson and Mr. Fisher both made their fortunes by investing in the coal industry. So this artist is really thinking about that connection to their own livelihoods in creating this work and presenting it. There's an artist collective. Many times, groups of artists will work together on artwork, and they will have a collective name. This group, their collective name is called Industry of the Ordinary. And this is a proposal for a 3D model of one of the doorknobs of the Nickerson Mansion. And what they will be doing is making this life-size. So they're taking and examining a detail of our building and blowing it up so that you can really see the design behind it. And this is their artist rendering of that project. I know. Jefferson Pinder, another SAIC faculty member. This is not the work that we will have, but it's a good representative. It's maybe hard to see from the back, but these are all ceiling tiles, historic. There you can kind of see. If you look up tin ceilings, and he has repurposed them into artwork. For our installation, he will be doing something similar like this that will be set into one of our fireplaces, and it will have a sound element where it will actually, he is working with the video data bank at the School of the Art Institute to come up with ambient street noise from the 19th century, and that artwork will then be sharing that noise of what you would have heard outside of the mansion. Another artist collective who go by the name Luftwerk, their work is very much about light. This is an example of an installation that they've done in Chicago, and this is their artist rendering. I'm not supposed to show you all this, but I'm showing you as a preview. So this is in our third floor gallery space, and if you come into the museum and you look, again, if you look up, you will see that there's a beautiful, intricate wooden ceiling on the third floor. Well, what they've done is they've taken that intricate design and reversed it, putting it on the floor and having the lights actually come up. So you, as a visitor, as displayed by these AI-generated people, will be able to walk among those lights and kind of experience an upside-down ceiling, if you will. I know. One of the things that we were talking about it, so my job, sometimes I'm the Debbie Downer of the world. I have to think about visitors and visitor safety, as does our director of collections, who's incredible. But one of the things that when you see this work, it won't be kind of flush to the ground because tripping hazard. So sometimes the most fun parts of our job are really working in partnership with artists who have these incredible ideas, but you have to then navigate and translate them into something that can be workable within a public space. Also, this is a gallery space that has a restroom in it, so you've got to have, enough space for people to walk by there and not, so there are all of these interesting challenges that I get to solve for every day. I was saying to Marie, the best part of my job is every day I get to use different memory muscles and think about how to solve different problems, challenges. Ebony Patterson, a Chicago artist who just won a MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant. And her work, which is really quite exquisite, is these cast resin and glass flowers, which are going to be on the first floor. So part of what makes this exhibition unique is it will also be embedded within that historic first floor gallery space. And it will actually be its own little white cube. It's a shadow box that will be installed on the first floor. And the artist Olivia Block, who is a sound and video artist. And now this is in the Mayer Gallery. And what was historically found in the Mayer Gallery? Taxidermy. And she really kind of wanted to link that past history with today and also with the animals themselves. Separately, she had been doing a lot of video documentation work with herds of elk in South Dakota. And so she is going to be presenting video of, and it looks very ghostly the way that she has manipulated the imagery, but these will actually be, herds of elk moving across that wall. And you will then at the same time hear the sounds of the elk as they move through their environment, which strangely is very meditative. It's not what I would normally think thousands of elk would sound like as they move across the space. So this is really a way that we will be very literally bringing that taxidermy back to life in that space. The artist Barbara Cooper, her work focuses very much on paper. This is not the work that will be in the exhibition, but she will be doing an installation of paper in one of those fireplaces in the library space. Lale Motley, an artist who connects herself to her home in Iran, and this is actually a Persian carpet that she will be creating. It's tilted on a wall right now, but she has recently gone back to her home country of Iran and collected leaves. She's also collected leaves from the trees that are just outside of the museum, and she will put those together under this, which is a plexiglass carpet. And so instead of the weaving, it will be crushed leaves that will create the patterns and the color underneath that. Again, this was another interesting process for us to think about. How can we make this safe for visitors? Can visitors walk on this? Can they not? And so she's been a great partner in helping us think about installing this piece. Beth Lippman is an artist based in Michigan who does these incredible glass pieces. What we really liked about this is, so these are historic decorative arts glasses that she has recreated as a modern contemporary glass artist on a historic table. The table is not glass, but this is not one piece. Each of those is a distinct separate piece that is installed together. So Beth will be on site for a period of about 5 days installing this piece as a part of this exhibition. But she's an artist who very much works with historic spaces, and her work really fits so nicely within. And then Bobby Meyer, who has taken very literally, on the right is the sculpture, Shooting Stars marble sculpture, which often is in our Mayer Gallery, and she is recreating the feeling of that sculpture here. And this artwork uses pantyhose and fiberfill and lots of common household items in it. So she's also thinking about this idea of the very special nature of the marble, and how do we really make it think about it in a more domestic space. And then Richard Hunt. We were already in conversations with Mr. Hunt before his sad passing just a year ago to have a sculpture of his. You know, if you think about Chicago artists and you think about materiality, Richard Hunt is at the top of that list. And this is the work that will be on view as a part of this exhibition. And I'll give you a little bit of the insights. You know, for us to get a work like this into the museum is no small feat, because we are, again, a historic space with historic-sized doors and one elevator that's not super huge. So this work will most likely come in through the front doors, and we will have to then create a special ramp for it to be able to go straight into the museum through the front door and then up those steps. But we had to really map it out, because the other part of that is we have those gorgeous chandeliers, and this is pretty tall. And it's heavy, you know, so there's also a lot of math in working at a museum. And finally, I think this is one of our last artists, Dakota Mace, who is taking very literally the walls of our exhibition space and recreating them, you can see on the right, through new designs. So that's just an overview of the exhibition that will open February 7th. For those of you who are members, which I know Maria is our ambassador for that, we will have a members opening that day, but we'll have programs throughout the run of the exhibition. It'll be on view. We always time these contemporary exhibitions to be on view during Expo Chicago, which happens every April. So finally, before I open up for questions, I want to just give you a preview of what's coming through the rest of this year. So in May, we are opening a watercolor exhibition. Now, before I said watercolor, would any of you have thought this image is a watercolor? No. So Rory McEwen is an artist who was very active in the 60s and 70s. He died in the 1970s, and he was a watercolorist who perfected a process of creating watercolor on vellum, or calfskin. And what that does is it makes these just this luminous, and they look very much like photographs. And he was very much someone who really perfected his craft and was very much about looking very closely at organic materials. So for us, this is an exhibition that fits very nicely because of, you know, all of the organic references in our historic buildings, but also the sheer beauty of these watercolors. We are doing this exhibition in partnership with Kew Gardens, who hold a majority of these works. So that's May through August. If any of you are in gardening clubs, I would love to know how to connect with garden clubs to get them in to see this. And then we will do a Tiffany glass exhibition next fall, Tiffany in Perspective. So one of our great holdings of our collection is Tiffany glass, and I think also just one of them, yet again, another untapped area of scholarship and beauty is Tiffany. There are so many different directions to take it in. This will significantly focus on lamps and light for the holiday season for next year. So in addition to an exhibition program, we have a great number of events, and as you all are people who are out and about, I wanted to highlight just a couple to encourage you to come down. Every third Wednesday, we have free, the museum is open late, we're open until 7 p.m., and we have free programming that takes place. Next February 19th will be our next free Wednesday, and we will be featuring Picosa Quartet, which is an incredible contemporary music quartet. They will be on performing at 6 p.m. that night. We don't have a January event because of our closure for our deep clean. And then new this year, we are partnering with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra to do a performance series of chamber musicians. The first one, we are looking at April for the first one. So you don't even have to be a member to buy tickets or to get information, just sign up on our website and you can find out more about that. One thing that we found, the Murphy Auditorium was built before amplification. You know, it was built before time when we had these fancy little headsets. And the space architecturally is meant for chamber music. It's just quite incredible. So it's really something special. So here's just a summary and a highlight of all the things that I've talked about. And now you're done with me. And I would very much, thank you. Thank you. But I would love to answer questions. I will do my best to answer any and all. I know Becky and Marie are going to have a microphone.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your incredible presentation.
Thank you.
I have 3 small grandchildren who, despite their young ages, and it fills my heart with delight, have expressed an interest in historic homes.
Oh my gosh.
Do you have any age limits on who you will let tour?
No, we do not.
So I can bring a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old.
Yes.
And surprisingly, the 6-year-old is the one who's most interested.
I mean, they sound great, so I'd love to be there when you bring them. We have a treasure hunt map. So when you bring them, ask when you check in for the treasure hunt. It's on a little clipboard, and so then you can take them around to each room, and like one of them is find the dragonfly in this room, or, you know, so we're not for every child, that I will tell you. And I kid you not, we have had to ask parents to take their children out of the fireplaces to get them out. But we encourage families to join and try to provide the resources to make it a quality visit. So I'd love to have them.
I think they'd love it.
Yeah. I should say we're open Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5, and then open late on Wednesdays. Yes?
What was the cost of the restoration that Mr. Driehaus?
You know, that precedes me, so I don't know the original, the cost of the original restoration. Ballpark, I would say, would be somewhere around $8 to $10 million.
Did you bring any of the things from the Driehaus mansion in Lake Geneva to the museum?
No. Most of the collection, all of the collection that we have has been ours. Some of it was in the private collection of Mr. Driehaus, but upon his passing, the house was sold. The collection was moved and the house was sold.
Do you let the adults get the treasure map?
If you ask nicely, you too can get the treasure map.
All the beautiful woodwork, were the trees from northern Wisconsin, or?
You know, that's one of the questions we don't know. I mean, one would assume that they got the resources for the floors and the woodwork close by, but, you know, we did not get an archive of that, the original building. And so the Nickerson family, there still is a Nickerson family office, or the family heritage office, but they didn't get the records of the original architecture. So we'd love to do, in fact, we're trying to find grant funding to get a researcher who could help look at the artists. Where did those artists come from? Where did they immigrate from? You know, Chicago, we know at this time, was a great welcoming city for artists and artisans, most likely from Europe, but we don't know where they came from or where they got their resources from. What we do have is a listing of the type of woods that were used. So we do know, and it's something like, I think, over 100 different types of wood.
I'm curious, who is Mr. Driehaus and why is the museum named after him?
So Mr. Driehaus has sadly passed. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was an early pioneer in investment management, was a self-made man who really invested wisely and then was able to create a foundation which is completely separate from us, that invested and supported a lot of historic preservation and architecture. He grew up in the south side of Chicago, lived in a bungalow, and really was someone who grew up very much with a sense of space and place, and felt very much that good art and a quality architecture and surroundings could elevate your life. And that was one of the things that he lived by. And so the museum is a culmination of all of his interests. So we are named after our founder. There are no family members involved. We are a public institution. Like the Frick or the Morgan, we carry a name of a founder, and we continue on with our mission. And it's Driehaus, not Treehouse or Dry House. I mean, it's, I have my last name is Key, K-E-Y, the simplest name ever, which often is also mispronounced. But I often find that a lot of people question how to say it. It's the Driehaus Museum.
Great. Well, let's give Lisa another round of applause.
I really thank you all. What a community you have here at the 19th Century Charitable Association. And I thank you, Marie, for the invitation to speak. And Becky and John and Ed, everyone has been just so wonderful today. So thank you so much. Great.